now time to move on to our next keynote, which is on reshaping data infrastructure for Asia and the world. And we're joined now by Ms. Lynn Mee, and Executive Director, Asia Cloud Computing Association, Singapore. Well, Lynn has an extensive experience in public policy, technology, policy development and government relations across the Asia Pacific, and has worked with many global, regional and local organizations on thought leadership development. Thank you so much, Ms. Lynn Mee, for joining us today. With this, the stage and screen is all yours.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us in this conference this morning. Thank you for having me here with all of you. I'll be sharing. My name is May Ann. I'm the Executive Director for the Asia Cloud Computing Association. And today I'll be sharing a little bit with you on my thoughts on reshaping data infrastructure for Asia and the world. It's a big topic, pretty heavy, but we'll do our best this Tuesday morning. A little bit over the hump of Monday, but not quite. So welcome to your Tuesday morning. I know a lot of you who have been interacting with me on LinkedIn, I did tell you that I would be giving a presentation on keys, since this was a key presentation, but no, I will not be giving a presentation on keys. Instead, we'll be talking about data centers and infrastructure in the world. So let me get straight to it and do a quick sharing of my screen to give you a sense of what we're going to be talking about. So, okay, we're talking about shaping data infrastructure for Asia and the world. And that's really, really important, because I think that data infrastructure basically undergirds a lot of the foundational technology that we're very, very, very dependent on these days. And what we're seeing around the world is really mimicked in Asia. So I won't spend too much time on Asia, but I'm happy to be interacting with you. So, if you'd like to ping me on Twitter, or if you'd like to ping me on LinkedIn, I'm really responsive, quite on LinkedIn as well. So if you'd like to look for me and add me and then have a conversation about that, that'd be really, really great. Tell me a little bit about whether or not you agree with my presentation, whether you disagree or not. I'm going to be covering a couple of questions. I'm going to be answering a couple of questions, or at least try to answer some questions. What is the shape of data infrastructure today? Where do we see some of those developments? What is going on with data infrastructure in Asia, throughout the world today? How do we think? What are we thinking about when we talk about data infrastructure? And can we go beyond data centers, for example? The second question is, and the second and third question are actually very, very much linked. The second question is really, where are the gaps that we're seeing? What exactly are we doing when it comes to the issues where infrastructure might not be moving as fast as we need it to be, or maybe the infrastructure is there, but some other barriers are holding us back from really using. What exactly are we missing out there? And therefore, where are the areas of reshaping that we'll need to have a really quick look at? Well, let me share with you, some research that we've been doing over at Asia Cloud Computing Association and also Access Partnerships. The first is, obviously, we're taking a really close look at where the data centers are in the world now. So this is not our research, by the way. This is by datacentermap.com. So as you can see, I've put the links there for you. And I believe that this presentation is going to be made available after the session. So you feel free to use the links. Not my intellectual property, guys. This is actually belonging to datacentermap.com. So we're looking really quickly at the number of data centers and the where they are in the world today. So you can see the data center map here. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be the most accurate data center map. As you can see, there's actually a data center map tab on the top left-hand corner, and also a cloud server map. So you've got different approaches and different ways of thinking through the shape of data infrastructure. And this gets a little bit complicated and really quickly, or, some people, it's actually really simple, but it gets complicated really quickly, because you're thinking about, okay, I thought data infrastructure was just all about the data center. Well, not quite, right? Because you've got data centers, you've got cloud. So we're taking a look at exactly where these data centers are. And you can see some of the colored notes at the bottom where you have the pin drops. You've got non-neutral data centers or carrier neutral data centers, and then buildings with multiple data centers. Now, this map isn't particularly interactive because it's just a screenshot, but if you go to data center map, you can actually zoom in and interact with the elements there. And you'll see at a glance, like, okay, hold on, where exactly is this distribution here? So this is one example of what we're looking at when we talk about what's the current state and shape of data infrastructure today. Is it well distributed? Is it not well distributed? How exactly are we doing? And by the way, the pin drops might not actually be accurate, in terms of where exactly the data centers are. So don't take the pin drops with a bit of a pinch of, I won't say salt, but just make sure that you don't assume that where the pin is dropped is exactly where the data center is physically located. Have a quick look on the data center map as well as the cloud server map here. I have another one which will actually give you another view of where the shape of data center infrastructures are, which is good because this is from datacenter.rs, and it maps out a little bit of where the number of data centers are across the world, but also really specifically, what the power distribution are, where the white spaces are. You can see that you can actually do a quick drop down to identify the countries, who the data centers belong to the companies, the white space availability, and the capacity. And that's really important because not all data centers are built equally, right? You've got some data centers with bigger capacity, some data centers which have less capacity. And you'll see in counterpoint to this first map, you'll see that, okay, it looks like the US has like one pin drop with one data center somewhere in the middle of the US, but that's not the case here, because you'll see that that's 1021 in I believe in the US, according to this particular set. So you've got to triangulate some of your data. So that's actually one of the points that I'll make a little bit later. But in terms of where the current state and shape of data infrastructure today is, two of these maps will give you an idea of the distribution of, number one, data centers, number two, the cloud server maps. So you'd have to obviously triangulate and see, okay, well, we want to take a snapshot. What exactly are we snapshotting? Well, this is one of the mechanisms in which you can have a quick look at where the data centers are for infrastructure. Now, how much of them are distributed throughout Asia? So you can, depending on how you want to define Asia Pacific, Northeast Asia, you can go click through and have a quick look at the distribution as well. As you can tell, it's not too bad, not well populated, but wow, look at Europe and the number of pin drops that there are there. Definitely some inequalities and inequities there. So that's just one aspect of the shape of data infrastructure today. That's number one. Number two, you've got submarine cable. So this is, I think for those of you who are within the space, you'll be really, really familiar. This is Telegeography's submarine cable map, and you can see that, wow, look at all of these submarine cables which are connecting countries to each other. And Asia Pacific looks pretty busy. Look at that, the number of bubbles that we have there. That's a submarine landing station. So it's not too bad. I think that in terms of Asia, we're pretty good. But as you can tell, we do have a number of countries which are located more inland, and we do have a problem there because these are submarine cables. If you have landlocked countries, like for example Laos, you will have problems with connectivity, because then it's a matter of making sure that you have enough throughput and enough bandwidth that's going into your country. But if you don't have a submarine cable landing station because you are not connected to a body of water called the sea, then you might have a little bit of trouble there. I think that in terms of landlocked countries, this is not new, but it does exacerbate some of the challenges that we're seeing for data infrastructure today. Now, I'm going to show you the next slide, which I like it the best. It's another aspect of data infrastructure, and people don't actually think about this, and it's very exciting. Okay, I'm geekly excited about this because this is Esri's satellite map. And I know that you can't quite see it properly. If I do a full screen, you can actually see the pretty dots that you have there. That's 19,209 satellites that are loaded in this particular map. And I've did I put the URL? Yes, the URL is in the top, the bottom left-hand corner. You'll see that these are satellites that are owned, by all the countries that have been there. There are a couple of leading space countries: Australia, Canada, China, France, India, Japan, Russia, the UK, and the US. So you can actually go onto the Esri map and you can click on it. In a hearkening call to I guess Gravity, the movie Gravity, you can see like there's all junk, not junk, so you can actually exclude them, etc. So there's sizes as well, orbit, period, inclination, apogee, and perigee. We have in this particular map 19,209 satellites that are here. And in terms of the data infrastructures, if we're thinking about next generation, and I do mean like really next generation communications and next generation technology and data infrastructure, we'd better be looking at satellites as well, because they are one aspect of communications, which I'm really talked about, but I'm really excited about it because I really like talking about nerdy things like satellite maps. So that's another aspect of, taking stock of the state of the data infrastructures today and the state of play. So are we actually looking at submarine cables? Are you looking at data centers? And are you looking at, in the next instance, satellites? And that's something that I want to be putting forth to you. So we have this state of play when it comes to the state and shape of data infrastructure today. So what are the questions that we'd like to ask? Well, I'm just putting it all out here because I don't like to click through slides and things like that. But so I'm just putting it out there. Again, very happy to be interacting with you. If you've got questions, please drop them into the chat, or even better, just drop me a note on LinkedIn or Twitter to start a conversation about this. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? What are the gaps that we're seeing, and are we reshaping these? How are we reshaping these in Asia, throughout the world, elsewhere as well? The first is something which I've already pointed out, the physical distribution of data infrastructures. There are inequities. If you're looking at something like this, for example, you can clearly see that there are places where there are countries, there are economies where there may not be necessarily sufficient data centers or data infrastructures to support maybe the demand. We're not quite sure about that, and I'll come to that a little bit later, but inequities are definitely there. I've spoken also a little bit about the submarine cables and the inequities for landlocked countries there as well. So that's number one. We're having that because I'm putting that as a really important part of the discussion, because I think that it does impact, well, yes, inequities, inequalities, but it impacts physical things like latency of your services as well. And also it factors into your country and your business's resilience and risk calculations. Are you able to have a failover data center with X amount of latency within a certain range? I think that that's something which we need to be looking at really, really importantly. And when we compare Asia across the world, let me just give you an example of something which I know is an issue, which is the sustainability question. I know, for example, in terms of risk calculations for sustainability, in Asia, we don't actually have enough green data centers. And I know that there is an effort to green or re-green some of the existing data centers. But as you know, going back to re-engineer your data center in your building is a little bit more difficult than if you were actually to build it green in the first place. So that's a bit of a challenge that we have in terms of just the physical distribution, the physical creation of the data infrastructure that we have right now. I won't go into the submarine cables or the satellites because I think that that's a little bit more esoteric, but I think that that's a discussion that we need to have in terms of building for the future, right? The second gap that we're actually looking at is the data governance and policy infrastructures. So questions around the use of the data infrastructures require structures around how to be governing them. So the structures of how to be governing them are definitely policy. So do you have data protection policies? Are they robust enough? Are you updating them? There are also cloud migration mechanisms. Are your technical guys actually trained enough to ensure that they've got good cloud migration mechanisms in place? Are they standard SOPs? Do they understand interoperability and all of the standards that are required to ensure that different systems can talk to each other? Similarly, is there adherence to info or data management and cybersecurity standards? I think it's a really big, important question for us to be ensuring that there is a level of understanding when it comes to data infrastructures and data management of that data infrastructure. The third question in terms of the gaps that we're looking at is, are there cooperation mechanisms? I think that we're starting to close the gap on this. Digital economy agreements are coming up. There are cybersecurity collaborations which are already in place for a long time, which actually come up from a lot of military collaborations. Digital trade zones are also something that's been really discussed over the last couple of years, especially because of the intense discussions around work from home and nobody being able to travel. So digital trade zones are becoming really, really important. The fourth thing when it comes to the gaps that we're seeing, at least I'm observing, is that we need better measurements. We need good measurements, and we need the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector to ensure that we're able to measure the things that we need to measure, the things that we want to be improving. So for example, the size of the cloud adoption, not adaptation, but sorry, cloud adoption. Let me change this. Really live adoption per deployment, SaaS, PaaS, yes, size of cloud market by country, by demographic. Do we have this information? Not sure. Who's keeping that information? Not sure. We need to make sure that we can have these things so that we can improve. If you want to say that we actually want to improve the deployment of the cloud market in a particular country, we need those statistics. So where are we going to get that? And finally, the thing that I want to be asking, are we reshaping any of these gaps? Is the next generation internet? Are we looking at important things like getting the next billion people online? Are we looking at local language acceptance? This is just for example, okay? This is universal acceptance. When you type in a URL, are you able to type it in a local language, for example? In fact, is your browser able to accept the local language input? Are we looking at possibly affordable and sustainable satellite coverage for connectivity? Are we engaging more in the 5G and, God forbid, 6G discussions? Because I think that 6G is actually coming up as a point of information right now already. Are we engaging with this? Is your country engaging with this? Are you engaging with this? Are we talking about these? So these are some of the gaps that we're actually looking at. These are some of the gaps that we're seeing. Is Asia actually starting to reshape this? I think that we are quite cognizant that in Asia we are seeing quite a lot of the gaps and the impact of the gaps. So that the inequities, the inequalities, I think we're seeing that. So the question is that, are we actually going to be going into all of these aspects in terms of the gaps I've just mapped out? Are we going to be changing them? Are we reshaping this? I think that there are starts to some of the cooperation mechanisms. There are starts to some of the measurements. I know that one of my colleagues just released a digital index for ASEAN, just measuring a lot of the digital indicators, and I'm really, really proud of that research by Michael. It's something that we're all working towards. Are we moving fast enough? I think that's the question, right? Are we going to be engaging with the public sector, the private sector, everybody together, and let's move ahead and be closing some of the gaps that we're seeing? Not quite sure, but that's something which I'd love to challenge you on. Very happy to be chatting with you about this again. Please leave me a note. Tell me if did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? Did I miss anything out? Let me know by LinkedIn or Twitter, and you can get me on all of those emails. And thank you very much for listening to me. This has been Reshaping Data Infrastructure for Asia and the World. I've left you with a lot of questions. I really enjoyed speaking with you this morning. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lin Mei, for that great keynote on reshaping data infrastructure for Asia and the world.